My fiancée secretly attended a swingers party, so I canceled the wedding and vanished without a trace. My name is Thomas, and what I'm about to share is a story that altered the course of my life in ways I never could have anticipated. 2 years ago, I was engaged to a woman I believe would be my wife, Margaret. She was the love of my life, or at least that's what I thought at the time. I was convinced she was my future. We were just a few months away from our wedding, and I had already envisioned our life together. A home, a family, everything. But what I didn't realize back then was that love only works when both people value it equally. And Margaret, as it turned out, didn't value it the same way I did. Margaret and I were different in many ways. She was outgoing, loved being the center of attention, and thrived in social settings. I, on the other hand, was more grounded and private. At first, I thought our differences balanced each other out. I was a steady one, and she was a fire. But sometimes, fire burns everything in its path. A few months before the wedding, I started noticing changes in Margaret. She was going out more often, staying out late, and acting distant. At first, I told myself it was just stress from wedding planning. Maybe she needed to blow off some steam. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Then one night, I realized I wasn't just being paranoid. It was a Friday evening, and I had just gotten home from work. I was exhausted and looking forward to a quiet night together. We hadn't spent much time together lately, and I thought maybe tonight would be different. I ordered food, set up a movie, and waited for her. When Margaret came out of the bedroom, she was dressed to impress. Tight dress, high heels, makeup flawless. I knew that look. "Where are you going?" I asked, already feeling a sinking sensation in my chest. She smiled. "Some of my friends are throwing a party downtown. It's going to be amazing, Tom. You should come." I shook my head. "I don't want to go." Frustration crept into my voice. "Margaret, you've been out 3 times this week. Don't you think we should spend some time together?" She rolled her eyes as she touched up her lipstick in the mirror. "Thomas, it's just a party. I want to have fun. Are we past the stage? We're getting married in a few months. Shouldn't we be focusing on us?" I sighed. "You're acting like an old man. It's just a few drinks with friends. Why do you always make this a big deal?" "Because I don't understand why you keep choosing nights out over time with me," I replied, my voice rising. That's when she snapped. Her face hardened. "I'm going whether you like it or not." And with that, she grabbed her purse and walked out the door. I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Something felt off, completely off. Margaret came home late that night, earlier than I expected, but she barely looked at me as she walked in. Her makeup was smudged, and her hair was messy, like she had been running her fingers through it. She was wearing an oversized hoodie, which wasn't her usual style after night out. Normally, she liked to show off, even after a party. But tonight, she was covering up. She tossed her heels by the door and muttered, "I need a shower." I watched her go into the bathroom without another word. She seemed nervous. Maybe it was the way she avoided my eyes or the way her voice lacked its usual confidence. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my gut was telling me something was wrong. When she came out, she barely spoke. She just climbed into bed and turned her back to me. No goodnight, no explanation about the party. I stared at the ceiling for a long time that night, trying to ignore the feeling that something was shifting between us. The next evening, she got home from work and acted normal, like nothing had happened the night before. She greeted me with a casual "hey" and dropped her purse on the counter. I played along, acting like I wasn't still bothered by the fight we had before she went out. After dinner, she stretched her arms over her head and sighed. "I need a long shower," she said, walking toward the bathroom. I nodded but said nothing. 30 minutes later, she stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. She walked across the room casually, reaching for one of my T-shirts from the dresser, and that's when I saw it. A bruise on her hip, dark, deep, the kind that doesn't come from just bumping into something lightly. My stomach twisted. "Margaret," I said carefully, my voice steady. "What happened there?" She looked down at the bruise like she was seeing it for the first time, but then, too quickly, she shrugged. "Oh, that? I bumped into the bar counter last night. Some guy accidentally pushed me. She laughed a little, waving it off like it was nothing. But something about her tone was off. Too casual, too quick. I studied her face. That bad, huh? I asked, keeping my tone light. She nodded, pulling the t-shirt over her head. Yeah, I guess I bruise easily. She said it as if she didn't care. But I noticed her hands fidgeting. She was lying, and Margaret wasn't a good liar. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Yeah, looks like it hurt. She gave me a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's nothing. Anyway, let's go to bed. She climbed under the blankets quickly, facing away from me, as if she wanted to end the conversation before it even began. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the floor. I didn't know what it was yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Margaret wasn't telling me the truth, and for the first time in our relationship, I felt like I was lying next to a stranger. The next few weeks, I tried to act like everything was fine, or at least that's what I told myself. Margaret still went out often, always saying she was with Linda, her best friend. I stopped arguing with her about it, stopped asking questions. If she wanted to go, I let her, but deep inside, I was paying more attention than ever, watching, waiting. Then one night, everything changed. Margaret was in the shower, and her phone was on the couch, face up. I wasn't even thinking about checking it. But then the screen lit up with a message from Linda. I still can't believe you did that. My stomach dropped. Did what? I stared at the message, my pulse hammering in my ears. The curiosity burned through me. My hands were sweating. I had to know. I picked up the phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. The lock screen notifications only showed that one message. If I wanted more, I had to unlock it. And I almost did. But then the bathroom door creaked open. Margaret stepped out, wrapped in a towel, steam rolling out behind her. I put the phone down like it was on fire and grabbed the TV remote, pretending to flip through channels. She didn't notice, but I did, and I knew in that moment that nothing would ever be the same. She hummed softly as she walked past me, completely oblivious of the fact that I had just uncovered something monumental. My hands were still trembling. That night, I lay in bed beside her, my body rigid like a board. Her breathing was slow, steady, and peaceful, the kind of calm that comes from someone who believes they have nothing to hide. But she did. And for the first time, I didn't feel an ounce of guilt about what I was about to do. Carefully, I reached across the bed, making sure not to disturb the mattress too much. Her phone was on the nightstand. I grabbed it and slipped out of bed, moving silently into the living room. Alone, I took a deep breath and unlocked it using the passcode I'd seen her enter countless times. The screen lit up, revealing her messages. I opened her conversation with Linda, and that's when my blood turned to ice. The night she had gone to that party, the one we'd argued about, the one she stormed out for, it wasn't just any party. It was a swinger party. And that night, Margaret had slept with 3 men at the same time. My grip tightened around the phone, my vision blurring for a moment. My stomach churned, and I felt like I was going to be sick. I scrolled further, my hand shaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake. For 6 months, she had been meeting men, going on dates, and sleeping around. Every time she looked me in the eyes and said, "I love you," she was lying. Every time she kissed me before leaving for a girls' night, she was cheating. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. My mind screamed at me to wake her up, to shake her, to demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I put the phone back, slipped into bed, and stared at the ceiling. I needed to be smart about this. If she could lie to my face for 6 months, I could pretend for a few more days. Because now I needed proof. I needed to catch her in the act. And when I did, I would make sure there was no way she could talk her way out of it. 2 days later, she had another girls' night planned. But now I knew the truth. I acted completely normal. I kissed her goodbye, told her to have fun, and as soon as she left, I followed her. She drove across town, picked up Linda, and then headed to a bar downtown. I parked my car across the street and watched as they walked inside. Minutes later, 2 men arrived. They greeted Margaret and Linda like old friends, hugging, laughing. Margaret touched one of the men's arms, leaning in to whisper in his ear. She was flirting. I took out my phone and snapped photo after photo. An hour later, they left the bar. Margaret and Linda got into her car, while the two men got into theirs. They drove to a hotel. I watched as Margaret stepped out of the car, smoothing her dress before turning to the man she had been laughing with all night. He pulled her close, and without hesitation, she tilted her head up and kissed him. My stomach twisted, but my hand stayed steady as I snapped a photo, then another. She laughed softly against his lips, took his hand, and they walked into the hotel together, like I had never existed. There was no doubt now, no excuses. Margaret was a liar and a cheater, and I had proof. I didn't wait. I drove home, grabbed a suitcase, and packed whatever I could. My movements were fast, deliberate, no hesitation, no second-guessing. When I was done, I slid off my engagement ring, staring at it for a brief moment before placing it on the kitchen counter, a silent message, a final goodbye. Then, without looking back, I walked out the door for good. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room. The unfamiliar ceiling above me reminded me that my life had just taken a sharp, irreversible turn. My body felt heavy, my mind exhausted, but the moment I reached for my phone, any trace of grogginess vanished. Dozens of missed calls, all from Margaret. Notifications flooded my screen. Texts, voicemails, desperate attempts to reach me. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? What's going on? I stared at the messages, my thumb hovering over her name. For a moment, I ignored them. I wasn't going to respond. I had nothing to say to her. Instead, I took a deep breath and made a few calls. Just like that, the wedding was canceled. But that wasn't enough. Margaret had spent months sneaking around behind my back, lying, cheating, humiliating me. Now, she was probably panicking, scrambling to come up with an excuse, a way to spin this in her favor. I wasn't going to give her that chance. I opened my messages and created a group chat. Her parents, my parents, our closest friends, everyone who had received a wedding invitation. Then, with steady hands, I attached the photos, Margaret kissing another man, walking into a hotel with him. Clear, undeniable. Finally, I typed out a message. The wedding is canceled. Here's why. And then I hit send. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. I didn't need to see the reactions. The truth was out now, and there was no undoing it. Without a second thought, I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the bed. I leaned back against the headboard and exhaled. It was over, and for the first time in months, I felt free. Margaret lost it. The moment I turned my phone back on, it exploded with messages, calls, voicemails. She was panicking, desperate to do damage control. What did you do? Please, let's talk. It's not what you think. I didn't bother listening to her voicemails. I didn't bother reading her texts. What could she possibly say? That it was a mistake? That it didn't mean anything? That it wasn't what I thought it was, despite the undeniable proof in those photos? No. I let the phone ring and ring, each call more frantic than the last, until finally the notifications slowed down. She knew. She knew I wasn't coming back. I was already gone. I packed up my life and moved to another city, somewhere far enough that I wouldn't have to run into anyone who knew me as Margaret's fiancée. I found a new job, a new apartment, a new version of myself that didn't live in the shadow of her betrayal. At first, the silence felt strange. I had spent so long in a relationship that revolved around someone else's choices, waiting for Margaret to come home, wondering where she was, convincing myself that her absence didn't mean anything. Now, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I threw myself into work, hit the gym, and focused on rebuilding myself. I never looked back. Months passed, then a year. I didn't try to find out what happened to her. But people talk. Rumors have a way of finding their way back to you. Margaret's life had fallen apart. Her parents were furious. They had been blindsided, humiliated by the wedding scandal. I heard they stopped speaking to her for a while. Her new relationships? None of them lasted. Apparently, the men she had so eagerly thrown herself at weren't interested in anything serious. And her reputation? Ruined. The same people she had once partied with, The same friends who encouraged her behavior turned on her once they realized she wasn't loyal to anyone, including them. But I didn't care. Not once did I feel pity for her. Not once did I feel the urge to check in, to see if she was okay, because she made her choice, and I made mine.